Hi everyone, my name is Mallory and I was asked to do a little tutorial on how to make the isolation gowns for QHC out of the kits that are being picked up from Fun with Stitches. So I've got my pieces laid out. Each kit comes with enough for 25 gowns. So for each individual gown, you're going to need 2 of these back pieces. Okay, so I have 2 here. You're going to need 2 sleeve pieces. And you're going to need 1 of these front pieces. You're also going to need 1 of these strips of bias tape. So this is double fold bias tape that you're going to use to bind the neckline and make ties at the neck. You're going to need 2 pieces of elastic. These have been pre-cut for you and they're for the sleeve cuffs. And then you also need the 2 pieces of twill tape, and those are going to be for the waist ties. So these directions basically follow the free pattern that's available from peekaboopatternShops.com. And so I'm going to walk you through my method for doing these gowns. I typically sew them in batches, but I'm going to walk through step-by-step construction of one gown for you. So the first thing that I'm going to do when I'm making gowns is I'm going to finish a couple of the edges that need to be hemmed. So I'm going to go along the bottom of my sleeve edge and this long straight side of each back and serge those without taking off any seam allowance, just to finish the edges. But I'm also going to take one of my twill ties and I'm going to put it 18 inches down from the neckline.
I can see your hand from there.
And as you can see, I have helpers. And I'm going to clip that in place so that I can serge that in when I finish the seams. So now I've got my back pieces and my sleeve cuffs all serged and ready for later. So the sleeves I'm going to set aside for now. And I'm going to work with the back pieces. And so you're going to first match up your shoulder seams. And whichever side you have the tie on, you want to think about how that's going to work when you hem it. So you're going to turn these edges over and straight stitch them to make a hem. So you want to make sure that your tie is coming out. If it's on the other side and you turn it under, then it's going to get tucked inside the gown. So then I'm going to match up my shoulders, make sure my back pieces are mirrored. And then I'm just going to stitch along these 2 shoulder seams. Okay, so I've gone ahead and attached with a 1/2 inch seam allowance my shoulder seams. I've used my serger for those so the edges are finished. The other thing that I'm going to do right now is attach my second waist tie because it's a really big pain if you forget this step and have to attach it after. Ask me how I know. And so this one goes on the opposite side seam to where you have your tie in the back. So my tie in the back is on this side. I'm going to attach this one to this side seam on the inside. And I want it 6.5 inches down from the armpit. So I'm just going to clip it in there. And I'm not going to sew my side seams right now. I attach the sleeves first while they're flat. But doing this right now saves me a lot of headache later. And so I've got my sleeves that I finished earlier. And I'm going to take a sleeve. Oops. I'm going to open out my gown. Okay, so this is the right side facing up and this is my shoulder seam. I like to fold my sleeve in half and find the center point and match that to the shoulder seam. I've had the most success using a lot of Wonder clips. Bulldog type paper clips can also work really well. And so I pin one end and then just sort of ease it in between as best I can. This material doesn't have a lot of give. So I've had success using quite a few clips. same for the other half of the sleeve. And I'm just sort of easing the material as best I can in between here. Sometimes I have to make some adjustments. And then I'm going to run this seam through my serger with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to do the exact same thing for the other sleeve, and then we'll come back and do the side seams. Alright, so we now have something that's starting to resemble a gown. So I have both of the arm side seams done, and the last thing that you're going to do to finish the basic gown construction is you're going to sew along the whole side seam. So starting at the cuff, through the armpit, and all the way down on both sides. And that's going to finish your gown construction, and then we'll move on to hemming, cuffs, and finishing the neckline. So I've gone ahead and joined front to back at the side seams on both sides using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So now the basic gown construction is done, and we just need to do some finishing. What I've also gone ahead and done while I was sitting at my serger is finish this bottom edge. So this is going to get hemmed as well. So I just run over it with my serger, not taking off any seam allowance so that I can turn it up and hem it as well. And I've got my 2 ties, opposite side seam to the back seam. And so that's all ready to go. I'm going to go sit at my sewing machine now and do a couple of things. I'm going to turn over each side of the back using a 1/2 inch hem allowance and do a straight stitch to hem that. And then I'm also going to do the same on the bottom. So I'm going to hem my side, and then I'm going to turn up my bottom with a 1/2 inch hem allowance and do that with a straight stitch. And I'm going to start my sleeve cuffs. So I'm going to turn them over to the wrong side, and I'm going to straight stitch almost all the way around. I'm going to leave a gap of about 1 inch to thread my elastic through. So once I have that done, I'll show you how to finish the casing. So I've gone ahead and finished hemming the 2 side seams at the back and my bottom hem. So everything with a 1/2 inch hem allowance. And I've also created my sleeve casings. So I've turned the sleeve right side out so you can see the stitching. And I've left a gap of about 1 inch. I've turned these up about 3/4 of an inch because we're working with 1/2 inch elastic. So you need to make sure it fits within your casing. And so it's hard to see my black stitching on my serge thread. So here's my gap. I'm using a bodkin for my elastic. If you don't have one of those, a safety pin works just fine. And I'm going to thread my elastic through my casing, making sure I don't pull the end of the elastic through the hole. And you're going to make sure there's no twist in your elastic. You're going to lap one end over the other like this. And then you're going to stitch over top of that a few times with a zigzag stitch to secure it. Pull it through and then finish off the casing so you end up with an elastic sleeve that looks like this. Okay, so the final step, constructing the gown, we're going to bind the neckline. And we're going to leave these long tails on our bias tape as ties. So I've got my bias tape opened out, and I'm going to attach right side of bias tape to the wrong side of my gown. This clip marks the middle of the neckline, and I've got a hold of the middle of my bias tape. And so then you're just going to open it flat all the way along your neckline, okay, clipping or pinning, whatever you're doing as you go. And then you're going to stitch basically along that fold line with a straight stitch. So I think that's going to give us about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So spread that all out, do 1 stitch, and then I'll show you how to fold it over and finish the binding. Okay, so I've got my bias tape sewn on, and I'm going to fold it up and over so that it sandwiches that raw edge. Okay, so you can't see the raw edge anymore. It's sandwiched in the layers of the bias tape. You're going to do that the whole way around your neckline. Okay, and then at the very end of the tie, we want to finish these off so that it doesn't fray. So I'm going to open it up, fold the end in, and then fold it back together so that when I stitch, I'm going to stitch all along the tie, around the whole neckline, enclosing that seam, and then all the way down to the end of the other tie, which I'm going to finish in the same way. And while I'm at my sewing machine, I'm also going to take these twill ties, and I'm going to turn the ends of them under and finish them, because as you can see, this one is already starting to fray, and we don't want anything fraying on these gowns. So once I've got it all finished, I'll bring it back, I'll show you the finished product, and you'll be well on your way to making 25 of these. Alright, so I finished off the neck binding. So that entire neck seam is encased within the bias tape. And then I finished my ends so that these are long and will tie behind the neck. You have a nice isolation gown with cuff sleeves. All the edges are finished. I've finished the ends of my twill ties. And so, like I said before, I like to batch sew these. Find it's a little more efficient. But hopefully this helps you to get through your kit, and we can get lots and lots of gowns made for our frontline workers at QHC.